All right, time to start our next chapter. Chapter 3 is all about consumer credit, and we're going to be introducing you to consumer credit today in section 3-1. All right, so our first warm-up is pretty easy here. It says if you save $55 per month, write an expression for your total savings after X years. All right, and so one thing that might be kind of tempting to do is just do 55 times X, but you got to realize it's $55 per month that's being saved, and it's asking you for an expression in years. All right, so throughout this class, it really becomes important to make sure you're paying attention to the units of measure. For instance, you don't want to have two different measures of time, like month and years. So you want to go ahead and make them all the same, one way or the other, right? And so if you save 55 per month, it's pretty easy to figure out how much you save per year, right? Just multiply 55 times 12. Since there's 12 months in a year, 55 times 12 would tell you how much is saved in a single year. All right, and then what you can do is just multiply that then by the amount of years, which in this case is X. All right, so if you multiply 55 times 12, right, 55 a month times 12 gives you the amount per year that's being saved. That's $660. Now, you would just multiply that times the number of years, which in this case is X, and you get 660X. All right, so 660 represents how much money is saved per year, and then X is the number of years. So you multiply those, and that gives you the total savings after X years. All right, so a lot of vocabulary coming up here. The first section of most chapters is pretty heavy with vocabulary, kind of introducing you to a lot of the terms that we're going to need throughout the chapter. This chapter is all about credit, so there is a lot of vocabulary, a lot of the words and terms used in loan documents, loan paperwork, that sort of thing, can be pretty confusing. So we spent a lot of time going through the vocabulary. All right, so since this chapter is really all about credit, let's talk about that. All right, basically what credit is, it's the ability to purchase something now, gain ownership of that product, that good or service now, but pay for it later. All right, that's really what it boils down to, is the ability to buy something now and pay for it later. All right, now the debtor. The debtor, also known as the borrower, is the person, or could be an institution like a business or even a bank, using credit for a purchase. All right, so whoever is using the credit, whoever is buying something now and going to pay for it later, that means they've gone into debt. So they become a debtor. They're borrowing the money. They become a borrower. The creditor is the opposite. The creditor is the person or institution that's extending that credit to the debtor, to the debtor, the one that is, giving the loan out. All right, so they're extending that credit out to somebody, so they're called the creditor. They're lending money to the borrower, so they're also known as the lender. Now notice in these last two terms, it says debtor and creditor, and then in parentheses it says borrower and lender. The reason for that is most people in their day-to-day vernacular, their day-to-day speaking to one another, would call them borrowers and lenders. However, most loan paperwork has a little bit more official terminology on it. They call them debtors and creditors. All right, so a lot of times the loan paperwork, the loan documents will have debtor and creditor, but as far as what we might refer to those people as, we would call them borrowers and lenders. All right, assets. All right, assets are everything that somebody owns. All right, so anything that you own that has value is considered an asset. All right, typically the big assets that people have usually are their home, their car, furniture, bank accounts are a big one. So these can be tangible things like, car or furniture, but they can be intangible things as well, such as bank accounts. All right, so anything that you own that has value is considered an asset. All right, earning power. All right. Earning power is exactly what it sounds like. It's a person's ability to make money right now, but also in the future. Some jobs maybe you start at a low. Teachers are an example. You start off not making a whole lot of money, but you get kind of regular raises, and you make more and more and more. So it's pretty easy to determine what you're going to make in the future. All right, and that's important, obviously. For somebody to give you a loan, they want to make sure that you can actually afford to pay back the loan. So your earning power is pretty important. All right, credit rating. All right, credit rating is kind of like the report card that you get, letting you and your parents know how you did in school. The credit rating is kind of a report card that lets you and other potential lenders know how well you meet your financial obligations. In other words, are you paying back your debts? Are you paying them back on time? Are you late? Are you missing payments? That sort of thing. So it all gets tracked. And anytime you go and apply for credit, one of the first things they'll do is they'll go and pull your credit history, pull up your credit rating, and see exactly where you're at. Credit rating really becomes pretty important later on in life, because if you have a poor credit rating, no one will lend you any money. Or if they do, they'll charge you exorbitant fees and interest rates, right? So you really want to make sure you have a good credit rating as an adult. All right. What is a credit reporting agency? These are companies that track and compile records on you or anybody else that is has any sort of debt. So this could be all the way down to even to like credit cards, right? They look at your credit card history, make sure you're paying those off. Your car that you bought, maybe financed, are you paying that bill off on time, right? Are you paying your rent off, your lease off in time, right? So, not just on time, but also completely, right? Are you paying the full bill, or are you, short paying? Right now, there's three main credit reporting agencies: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They all kind of do the same thing, just a little bit different way. They all have their own little formulas that they use to come up with exactly what they believe your credit rating score is. And, those scores are generally pretty close to one another. All right. Usually the only time that they're kind of way off is if one agency knows about some sort of loan that the other ones haven't found out about yet, or that you're late on a loan that the others haven't found out yet, or you paid off a loan and the others haven't found out yet, that sort of thing. But generally, they're all really close in line with one another. All right, and your credit score is kind of a number, and that number is on a scale, and it represents your credit worthiness. How likely are you to pay back a future loan, right? And it's based on a few things. It's based on your assets, right? How much do you have? Now that's important, because if you don't pay back a loan, they could what's known as liquidate your assets. In other words, sell them off and turn them into cash, and then pay off your debt, right? So the more assets you have, the more attractive you are as a borrower, because they know, hey, we can go seize that person's home or car and sell it, and then that'll pay off the loan that they aren't paying us, right? Earning power is another big thing, right? Somebody would be foolish to give me a loan on, a $30 million mansion, because I don't have the earning power to be able to pay that off, right? So that's another thing that they look at with your credit scores. How much money do you make? Because the more money you make, the more you can afford to pay off your debts, right? And the higher debt kind of amount that you can carry. All right, and your credit rating. Your credit rating being, how well are you? Have you, done in the past of paying off your loans, right? And they kind of figure the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, right? So if you haven't paid off your loans before, you're likely to continue that behavior, right? Or if you have done a good job of paying off your loans, you're likely to continue to do so. All right. Now, the most common type of credit score is what's known as a FICO score. All right, and this is something you'll hear a lot if you go down to go buy a car, buy a house, right? Apply for credit cards, really just about any kind of loan. One of the things they'll always do is pull your credit score. That usually asks for the FICO score, and that FICO is just named after the creator of the score itself, a company called Fair Isaac and Company. All right, so you don't need to know where it comes from, but you do need to know that the FICO score is just a numerical representation of just how risky or non-risky are you as far as a borrower, right? All right, a little more vocabulary. What is an installment plan? All right, so we're going to get into different types of loans today. The first one we're going to talk about is an installment plan. All right, and this is when usually a store offers consumers credit to pay for merchandise or services rendered over a period of time. All right, periodic payments are usually made monthly. All right, and so a great example of this is. I was redoing my kitchen in my house a few years back, and had to get a new dishwasher and stove and different appliances for our house, and they offered an installment plan where I could pay it off. To Home Depot is where I got the stuff, right? I could pay off Home Depot a little bit each month, and eventually pay for the product, but I was able to get it that day. So I was able to pick up the appliances that day, but then I didn't have to, I think I had 18 months, if I remember right. I had 18 months to pay it all off. All right, now what is a finance charge? A finance charge is kind of a word that a lot of times these stores that offer you credit, they will call the amount of interest that you have to pay them, they'll call it a finance charge. So think about, usually when we think of interest, we think of it as a percentage, the interest rate percentage. The finance charge is the actual dollar amount that you end up having to pay in interest. So it's kind of the total interest amount. All right. And these are usually applied to installment plans. Sometimes you can find installment plans that might have zero interest, zero finance charge for some period of time. And as long as you pay it off within that amount of time, it's interest free, which is kind of a nice thing. You got to be a little bit careful with those because if you don't pay it all off, they end up hitting you with a bunch of interest later. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. All right. What is a deferred payment plan? All right. So a deferred payment plan is similar to an installment plan, except there is no interest charged as long as the periodic payments are made on time. So this is the one I was just talking about. All right. So if you have some amount of time to pay off that loan, and as long as you pay it off on time, it's interest free. No finance charge involved. All right, and if you don't pay it off in time, if you're a day late or $1 short, these deferred payment plans will usually retroactively charge you interest. So in other words, going back to that example I had of Home Depot, I had 18 months. It was a deferred payment plan. I had 18 months to pay it off interest-free. If I didn't pay it all off by exactly 18 months, if I was short $1 or I was late by 1 day, they would have taken, all those thousands of dollars for those appliances, and they would have applied interest. They would have done an interest rate of it, and they would have taken all of that money and charged 18 months worth of interest on it. So even though after 18 months you only owe them $1, they wouldn't charge you interest on just that dollar at the end. They charge you interest on the entire purchase amount, all right, the entire principal, the entire amount that was borrowed. All right, so these can be real tricky, and quite honestly, they kind of hope you don't pay it off on time, right? They want to make interest. So they don't send out a bunch of reminders and tell you, hey, next month you have to have it all paid off. They kind of want you to not pay it off on time because they make a lot of interest off you that way. All right, so that's the real difference there. An installment plan has the finance charge, has the interest worked into it right away from day one. The deferred payment plan is the same thing. It's just there's some period of time where there's no interest, no finance charge. And as long as you pay it off by that date, and they're all different dates, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever, then you don't have to pay any interest. All right. And let's move on. So speaking of the deferred payment plan, if you don't pay it all off in time, or you make any payments that are short, say for instance you owe them $200 and you just don't have enough money that month, you only pay them $100, right? You go into loan default. All right, so default on a loan is when you fail to make payments, a full payment on time according to the payment schedule that's set up. So when you take out a loan, they give you some paperwork or email you some paperwork for when your payments are due, how much those payments are, and if any of them late or short by any dollar amount, you go into default. When you go into default on a loan, this is a really bad thing to happen for several reasons. First, it affects your credit score, your credit rating. It'll go down, make you less creditworthy. And another thing that happens a lot of times in loans is it automatically triggers fees or an increase in interest rates, sometimes both, right? So you definitely do not want to ever go into default on a loan. All right, a layaway plan. A layaway plan is similar to a deferred payment plan with one exception, that you don't actually get to keep the merchandise until after you make your final payment. So a deferred payment plan, you get the product, whatever it is you bought at the beginning, and you just keep paying it off while you're using it. A layaway plan, you start paying it off and you don't actually get to take home the product that you bought until after you've made all your payments. All right, down payment. All right, a lot of times in loans, they will ask you to pay for part of the purchase up front. It's usually a percentage. All right, this a lot of times happens with cars, houses, large purchases. They'll ask you to pay for a portion of the loan amount up front, say 10% or 20%, something like that. All right, and that's a down payment. All right, so let's get to our first example here. It says you need furniture for your first apartment. Many of you will be in this situation here coming up soon. You calculate that the couch, bed, and dresser that you want will cost you $3,372. If you save $300 per month, how long will it take you before you can buy the furniture? All right, now notice, nowhere in here does it say you take out a loan. Nowhere in here does it mention interest or finance charge. This is not a loan. This is just saying if you save $300 per month, how long will it take before you can buy the furniture, right? So in other words, you're saving the money yourself. All right, so this is really the preferred method. This is really how you can kind of keep yourself from going into a lot of debt, is rather than buying things that you can't afford and then paying them off later with interest, do what's being done in this example. You save the money yourself until you can actually afford to buy what you want to buy and then buy it. If you have the money saved up and then you go buy it, you'll never pay any interest, right? The only time you pay interest is when you want to buy something that you can't afford right now. All right. So if you save $300 per month, how long will it take you before we can buy the furniture? All right. So we need to save $300 in January, $300 in February, $300 in March, so on and so forth, until we've eventually saved $3,372. Let's see how long that takes us. All right. Now our monthly saving is $300. If I multiply that times the number of months, it will equal the total savings. So for instance, if I save $300 a month for 1 month, I do 300 times 1, that's $300. If I save $300 per month for 4 months, I would take 300 times 4, right? And that would tell me how much I saved in 4 months. So since it's asking how long will it take, what it's asking there for us to find there is the amount of time. All right, so the time in this problem is our unknown. So how long will it take? That's this thing. That's the number of months. So that needs to be our variable since that's our unknown. So you could call it T or X, whatever you want. All right. Be a little bit careful. Normally T is time in years. All right. The monthly savings amount we know is $300 per month. Let's put that in. And we know that we need the total savings to be $3,372. All right, so putting it all in there, I used M for number of months here. So we know that 300 times M is going to equal 3,372. All right, that's an easy equation to solve. Let's just divide both sides by 300 like this. The 300s will cancel out over there, and I get M equals 11.24. All right. Now, decimal amounts on like months or time is kind of a weird thing, right? What exactly is 11.24 months? Well, that's, probably like 11 months in a week or something, right? If you're saving per month, you're not saving per week. So we're saving 300 in January, 300 in February, 300 in March, so on and so forth. By the 11th month, November, you have not saved up quite enough yet. So you actually have to go all the way into the 12th month. 11 months is not enough, right? 11 times 300 would be 3,300. Wouldn't be enough, so you actually have to save for a whole 12th month. All right, so 12 months is how long it would take. Now, after the 12 months, you have enough money to go buy that furniture. You plunk down the cash to the cashier, and you don't end up paying any interest that way. All right, so that's definitely the best way to make sure that you don't get into credit trouble is don't buy things that you can't afford, right? Save until you can afford to buy it and then buy it. All right. So now let's look at another example. You need furniture for your first apartment. You calculate the couch, bed, and dresser you want will cost you $3,372. Sound familiar? All right, now it says instead of saving the money ahead of time and then buying the furniture, maybe you're a little impatient here. You purchase that furniture on a deferred payment plan where you must pay the loan off in 6 months or pay a monthly finance charge with an APR of 19.8% backdated to the first month. How much must you pay per month in order to avoid that finance charge? All right, so the question it's asking is how much must you pay per month in order to avoid the finance charge? Remember, the finance charge is the interest. All right, so how much do we have to pay in order to not pay any interest? Well, we have to pay the loan off in 6 months or else pay a monthly finance charge. All right, so we have 6 months to pay off this amount, $3,372. All right, so if I have 6 months to pay that off, let's figure out how much will be required. How much must we pay per month? That's our required monthly payment. That's our unknown here. We're going to take the purchase price, which is $3,372, and we're going to divide by the number of months we have, which is 6 months. All right? And basically, you spread out that $3,372 over 6 months, divide it by 6, and you get $562. So you would need to pay $562 per month, every month for 6 months straight, and then you end up paying all the furniture off. And because you paid it off within those 6 months on this deferred payment plan, you do not need to pay any interest. You do not have a monthly finance charge. However, if you pay one of these payments, you don't make that month, right? You don't make that payment that month, or you don't make a full payment, or it takes you even a little bit longer than 6 months. All of a sudden, what they'll do is they'll go back in and charge you 19.8% interest, not on what you have remaining, but on the entire purchase, on the entire loan amount. All right, and that's no fun. All right, so $562 a month will keep you out of having to pay interest here. All right. Now, let's look at what happens if you don't pay it off on time. What happens if you default on this loan and your final payment was a week late? All right, so now you're a week late, and because you're a week late, boom, it triggers penalties. All right, because you were late, it triggers some penalties, and in this case, it tells you. Go back to the problem. It tells you what the penalty is. You will pay a monthly finance charge with an 19.8% interest rate backdated to the first month. All right, so let's go through here. All right, since it's a monthly service charge, the interest is compounded monthly. All right. So there's one amount that gets borrowed. It's a single one-time loan amount. And so that's why you use this formula. It is compounded monthly, right? So there's a single one-time principal and it's compounded monthly. And so that formula right there should look familiar to you. We went over it in chapter 2, right? And so you would go ahead and figure out what we need. We know the balance is what we're going to end up paying, right? And that's what it's asking for in this problem. We know what the principal was. That was $3,372. We know the interest rate was 19.8%. And remember, that means 19.8 per 100, and that's how I got 0.198. All right, now the n is 12 because it is compounded monthly. N is the number of compounds per year. Since it's compounded monthly, that happens 12 times per year. And the t in this problem is 0.5. So the main mistake people will make on this problem is they'll put in 6 because they just see the 6 months. Remember, t is always time in years. So 6 months is half of a year. That's why it's 0.5. All right, now when you plug that stuff in, you plug that into your calculator, you end up with, if you simplify it that way, $3,719.91. Okay. So that's how much you would pay total, but remember, this is the amount right here that was actually borrowed. So yes, you pay $3,719.91, but you borrowed $3,372. So if you want to know how much you actually paid in interest, take this balance, plug it in, take this principal, plug it in, solve for the I, the interest, and you end up paying $347.91. All right, so pretty expensive mistake here, right? Because you paid basically an extra $348 in interest. That if you had just paid it off on time, instead of being a week late, you wouldn't have had to pay that $348. You'd have an extra $348 in your pocket. And because you were late on a payment, now all of a sudden your credit score is going to go down, right? And now when your credit score goes down, the next time you want a loan, they'll either charge you a higher interest rate or they'll say, no thanks, you're a credit risk. All right, so real important to pay attention to these deadlines, calendar things out. We'll talk later on in the year about budgeting your money so you can pay these off in time. All right, here's another example. You buy a $2574 laptop on a 2-year installment plan that requires a 15% down payment. If the monthly payments are $110, what is the finance charge? All right, so remember, finance charge is interest. That's just another word for interest. It's the total amount of interest you end up paying. All right. So let's go ahead and figure out what our down payment is, because we need to figure out how much we're actually borrowing on this loan. Okay, so let's figure out our down payment. The way you get a down payment is you take the purchase price, whatever it is, and you multiply by the down payment percentage. All right. So the purchase price is right here. It's a $2,574 laptop, and 15% is the down payment percentage. Remember, anytime you multiply or dividing using a percentage in a formula, you don't use the percent, you use the decimal equivalent. All right, so your down payment is going to be $2,574 times 0.15, which is $386.10. All right, so what exactly is that amount? That down payment amount is how much the store will require you to pay up front. So in order for you to get that laptop, you have to pay them 15% of its value right away. Okay, so if I want that laptop, if I want to take it home, I got to pay a $386.10 down payment. All right. So I've already paid off 15% of the laptop, which means I still have to pay off the remaining 85% of that laptop. Okay. And there's a 2-year installment plan where it tells me what the monthly payments are. All right. So let's figure out how much am I actually borrowing here? Because remember, Yes, the laptop cost $25.74, but I paid for part of it already. I already paid 15% of that. I paid the down payment. I paid this much of that $25.74. So how much exactly am I borrowing here? That's called the loan amount. All right, so let's get that. To get the loan amount, let's take the purchase price. We already knew that was $25.74. And let's subtract this down payment that we just found, $386.10. Subtracting that gives us our loan amount, $2,187.90. That's what I'm borrowing. That's what I still have to pay off. All right. So I already paid $386.10. I still have to pay off the rest of it. That's the loan amount, $2,187.90. Now that's called the loan amount because that's what I'm borrowing. That's how much they're loaning me. All right, $2,187.90. All right, so this right here is really how much I still am supposed to be paying them. But they're saying, hey, we want you to make 2-year payments, right? Monthly payments of $110 each. All right, so let's figure out how much total we actually pay in this problem. Let's figure out the total amount paid. The total amount paid is going to be this monthly payment, $110, times the number of months. Well, 2 years equals 24 months, right? So multiply that out, and you end up paying $2,640. So look at this. Even though I only was borrowing $2,187.90, I end up paying back this much. Those are my total monthly payments. Okay. Well, I was only supposed to pay this amount here, but because of the monthly payments, I ended up paying this amount here. So I ended up paying a lot more than the purchase price. All right. And what did I pay extra? That was the interest. All right. So you can kind of think of this as like the balance, the total amount paid off, and you can think of this as the principal, what was actually borrowed. Okay. So calculating the finance charge, it's a little tight to see in there. But the finance charge, the interest, I, is going to equal the total amount, $2,640. That's this amount, minus how much I was supposed to borrow, the loan amount. And when I do that subtraction, it's $452.10. Okay. So $452 in interest was paid on that laptop. Now, since that was a $2,500 laptop, you ended up paying about 20% in interest here. All right. Roughly a little bit less, but you end up paying a lot in interest.